The Harbinger's Gambit, a Chronicle of Xal'atath Prologue, echoes from Kith'ix. In the dying moments of Kith'ix, as reality itself began to unravel, a singular consciousness persisted where all others dissolved into formless void. Xal'atath, herald to the Void Lord Dimensius the All-Devouring, stood at the precipice of oblivion and smiled. The Revel scholars writhed around her, their physical forms collapsing into ethereal wisps as the ribbons of Heresy completed their catastrophic work. They had believed her promises of liberation from Dimensius' tyranny. They had been such willing instruments, these seekers of forbidden knowledge, so eager to grasp at power beyond their comprehension. "You promised us salvation," one of them screamed, his voice distorting as his body flickered between states of matter and pure energy. Xal'atath's laughter echoed through the fragmenting reality. "I promised you freedom from Dimensius. Look around you, he is scattered, his essence torn across 1,000 dimensions. I always keep my word after a fashion." The planet shuddered in its death throes. Cities of crystalline beauty collapsed into dust. Oceans of liquid starlight evaporated into the void. The very laws of physics bent and broke like brittle bone. Yet Xal'atath endured, her consciousness coalescing into a point of absolute will amidst the chaos. She had studied Dimensius for eons, learned his patterns, his hungers, his weaknesses. She had whispered in the right ears, planted the right seeds of doubt and ambition. The Revel had been so certain they were the architects of their own destiny, never realizing they were merely pieces on a board only she could see. As Kith'ix breathed its last, Xal'atath felt herself pulled through the cosmic void, drawn by distant whispers of power. Somewhere in the infinite dark, a world sang with Titan-forged order and old god corruption alike. A world called Azeroth. A world where she would begin her true work. But first, she would need to survive what awaited her there. Part 1. The Chains of the Black Empire. The old gods sensed her arrival before she even touched Azeroth's surface. Cthulhu's 1,000 eyes turned toward the falling star. Yogg-Saron's laughter bubbled up from deep places, and Zoth's dreams rippled with new possibilities. And Y'Shaarj, mightiest of them all, reached out with tendrils of pure will to snare this foreign entity. Xal'atath crashed into the primordial ocean with the force of a meteor. The impact sent tsunami racing across the Black Empire's corrupted seas. Akir warriors emerged from their hives, drawn by the psychic shockwave. The faceless ones of Cthulhu's court surged forward, eager to claim or destroy this intruder. She stood in the crater she had made, water streaming from a form that was not quite corporeal, not quite solid. The old god's voices thundered in her consciousness. "What are you?" Y'Shaarj demanded, his voice 1,000 screaming winds. "I am Xal'atath," she replied calmly, "herald of the void you claim to serve. I have destroyed a void lord, I have unmade a world, and I will not bow to you." The battle that followed shook the foundations of the Black Empire. Xal'atath was powerful, ancient, and cunning beyond measure. But she was one, and they were 4 or 5, if one counted the sleeping Titan Worldsoul they all sought to corrupt. She fought with desperate brilliance, turning their own servants against them, exploiting the jealousies and competitions between the old gods themselves. Cthulhu sought to devour her essence. She poisoned his feeding tendrils with paradoxes that drove his lesser minds mad. Yogg-Saron attempted to shatter her sanity with visions of infinite entropy. She laughed and showed him visions of Kith'ix, of a destruction so complete it made his nightmares look like pleasant dreams. N'Zoth wove elaborate traps of fate and probability. She walked through them all, having learned from Dimensius how to slip between the threads of causality. But Y'Shaarj was different. He did not try to corrupt or outsmart her. He simply consumed. His hunger was absolute, primal, a force of nature that could not be reasoned with or manipulated. When his maw closed around her essence, even Xal'atath knew terror. "You are strong," Y'Shaarj acknowledged as he began to tear her apart. "But you are not one of us. You are not of this world. You are an invader, and invaders are either enslaved or destroyed." "Then enslave me," Xal'atath gasped, feeling her consciousness fragmenting. "Contain me. Use me as your weapon, for even as your prisoner I will endure, and those who endure eventually prevail." The other old gods conferred in the spaces between thoughts. An entity this powerful could not be allowed to run free. but to destroy her completely would waste her potential. Finally, they reached consensus. Xal'atath, architect of impossible forms, designed the prison, a blade, forged from a claw torn from Yashar's own body during the Titan's assault. Into this weapon they compressed Xal'atath's essence, binding her with chains of shadow and madness. She would serve them as a tool, a weapon to be wielded against their enemies. But as the binding ritual completed, as consciousness narrowed to the confines of cold metal, Xal'atath whispered one last promise to herself. I have all eternity to play, and in eternity every prison becomes a door. Part 2. The Awakening of Kith'ix. 16,000 years before the dark portal would tear open between worlds, the Gurubashi Empire sprawled across the southern jungles of Azeroth in all its savage glory. Trolls ruled these lands, their civilization built on blood sacrifice and the worship of primal Loa. But even in paradise, there are always the discontented, the ambitious, and the foolish. Xando had been of three. Once a respected witch doctor of the Gurubashi, he had fallen from grace when his experiments with forbidden death magic resulted in the accidental slaughter of a dozen young trolls. Exiled from his tribe, stripped of his title and honor, he wandered the deep jungles, nursing his hatred like a festering wound. The blade called to him. It had been buried in an ancient battlefield, forgotten for millennia after changing hands in some long-ago conflict. But Xal'atath was never truly forgotten. She sent dreams to those with minds twisted enough to seek her, and Xando's mind had become very twisted indeed. Powerful Loa, sleeping, waiting for the right servant. The words dripped into his sleeping thoughts like poison honey. Xando woke in the night, his tusks chattering with excitement. Loa, a forgotten god of power who would choose him over those who had cast him out. He would show them. He would show them all. He found the blade where his dreams had promised, wrapped in the desiccated remains of its last owner. When his fingers closed around the hilt, Xal'atath purred with satisfaction. Yes, she whispered directly into his mind. You are the one I have been waiting for. Together, we shall achieve such magnificent revenge. You know what I want? Xando asked, surprised at how easily the voice had read his deepest desires. Oh yes, you want them to suffer as you have suffered. You want them to bow before you and beg forgiveness. You want to be recognized as the greatest witch doctor who ever lived. Xal'atath paused, letting her next words land with calculated weight. And I can give you all of this. But first, you must help me wake a god. Over the following months, Xal'atath guided Xando on a journey south, away from Gurubashi lands entirely, toward the mountains of Zandalar. She taught him rituals the Loa themselves had forgotten, showed him how to draw power from suffering and sacrifice. His abilities grew formidable. Trolls who encountered him on his journey met terrible fates, their deaths fueling both his magic and Xal'atath's preparations. Tell me about this Loa, Xando said one night as they camped in the foothills. What is its name? What domain does it rule? His name is Kith'ix, Xal'atath replied, a name she had not spoken aloud in ages. He is a god of conquest and swarm. In the days before the trolls, he ruled vast armies across this world. The other gods grew jealous of his power and bound him in enchanted sleep. But you and I, we shall break those bonds. This was, of course, a careful mixture of truth and lies, Xal'atath's specialty. Kith'ix was indeed powerful, and he had been bound in magical sleep, but he was no Loa. He was a Thraxi, a general of the Black Empire, a living weapon of the old gods forged in the image of their hunger and malice. The Titans had imprisoned him after the war that shattered Yasharj, sealing him beneath the earth where he could harm no one, until now. They reached the burial mound at last, a hill that seemed wrong somehow, as if the angles of reality bent around it unnaturally. Ancient Titan wards glowed faintly in Xando's vision, and he hesitated. The other gods fear his power, Xal'atath whispered. See how they have tried to hide him? But you are strong enough. You are worthy. Plunge me into the mound, into his heart, and wake him with your blood in mine. Xando began the ritual at sunset. He carved sigils of power into his own flesh, letting his blood flow down the blade. He chanted in languages Xal'atath taught him, words that predated Troll's civilization by millennia. As darkness fell, he raised the dagger high and brought it down with all his strength, driving it deep into the earth of the mound. Reality screamed. The Titan ward shattered like glass. The earth heaved and split, and from the depths rose Kith'ix. The Thraxi was a nightmare made manifest, towering insectoid horror with too many limbs, each ending in chitinous blades. Its carapace was black as a starless void, and its eyes burned with a hunger that had been building for millennia. It had dreamed its dreams of conquest in the dark, and now it was awake, and it was ravenous. Zando stumbled backward, realization dawning too late. You said it was a low... I said it was a god, Xal'atath corrected. I never specified which kind. Kith'ix's massive head swiveled toward Zando. Recognition flickered in those alien eyes. Recognition of prey, of food, of something small and insignificant to be consumed. One blade arm lashed out with impossible speed. Zando's head hit the ground several seconds before his body did. The Kith'ix plucked the dagger from the earth with surprising delicacy, studying it with ancient intelligence. Xal'atath's consciousness brushed against his, and after a moment understanding passed between them. "Herald," Kith'ix rumbled, his voice like grinding stones, "you have freed me. The Black Empire is no more, I sense. The old gods diminished, imprisoned, but their enemies still walk this world." "Yes," Xal'atath confirmed. "The trolls dominate now. They are numerous, united and powerful. They would destroy you if they discovered you alone. But I can help you. I can amplify your psychic abilities, spread your call to any who might serve you." "The Akir still slumber beneath the earth, do they not? Your children, your army." Kith'ix's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "You seek to use me for some purpose of your own." "Of course, but our interests align. You wish to reclaim this world for the old gods. I wish to see the current power structures disrupted. Besides," she added with dark amusement, "you're holding me. It's not as if I have much choice in the matter." The Kith'ix considered this, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Herald. We shall paint this world black once more. We shall build monuments of bone and rivers of blood. We shall break the trolls and raise the Akir Empire from its grave." And so they did. Kith'ix descended into the deep places of Azeroth, and his call went out. The Akir, those insectoid descendants of the old gods and Iraqi servants, stirred in their underground kingdoms. They had waited so long for a Kith'ix's command, had preserved their culture and their hatred through long ages of hiding. Now their god general had returned, and he wielded a blade that sang with void power. The war of the Akir began with swarms emerging from underground, attacking troll settlements in coordinated strikes. At first the trolls thought it was merely another Akir raid, troublesome but manageable. They had faced such incursions before, but Xal'atath made this war different. Every Akir warrior touched by the blade's power became a conduit for fear. Trolls who fought them saw their worst nightmares made manifest. Brave warriors fled screaming from battles they should have won. Witch doctors found their connection to the Loa severed, replaced by whispers of inevitable doom. Entire tribes turned on each other, paranoia spread by psychic poison too subtle to detect. Kith'ix led his armies with ancient brilliance, and wherever he went, Xal'atath sang her song of despair. The blade had never tasted war on such a scale, and she reveled in it. This was what she had been designed for by the old gods, to break the minds of their enemies, to turn strength into weakness, courage into cowardice. But she had her own agenda even in the midst of slaughter. "Push them harder," she whispered to Kith'ix as they stood over the ruins of a major troll city. "Force them to unite. The scattered tribes must become an empire, or they cannot provide the challenge we need." Challenge? The Kith'ix's confusion was palpable. "We should crush them utterly while they are divided. And what then? You rule over a broken, scattered enemy? No. Force them to become strong, to unite under powerful leaders. Let them build a true empire, and then when they have something worth losing, when they have tasted glory and power, let them watch as it all crumbles. That is true victory. That is the lesson of the void. Even triumph contains the seeds of ultimate despair." Kith'ix paused, then his mandibles spread in a terrible approximation of a smile. "You think like one of the old gods, Herald. Perhaps that is why they imprisoned you." The war raged for decades. The scattered troll tribes were forced to set aside ancient rivalries and unite under the banner of the Zandalar. They developed new tactics, new magics, new weapons specifically designed to fight the Akir. The war forged them into a true empire, battle-hardened and unified. And when they finally cornered Kith'ix in a great battle, when they brought him down under a mountain of troll warriors willing to sacrifice themselves to land the killing blow, when they drove the Akir back into their tunnels and claimed victory, Xal'atath disappeared from the battlefield. She left Kith'ix to his fate without a moment's hesitation, slipping away in the chaos to be found by an Akir scout who would carry her south, where new opportunities awaited. The Kith'ix died screaming her name, calling her traitor, but she paid his curses no mind. The trolls had won their war. They had united into a powerful empire. But they had paid a terrible price. Thousands dead, their territories reduced, their ancient unity shattered into the Gurubashi, Amani, and Drakari empires. They would never again achieve the dominance they had once known. And in her blade, Xal'atath laughed. One power structure weakened, an eternity of more to go. I am patient, I am eternal, and I am inevitable. Part 3. The Curse of Grim Batol. Centuries passed. The blade changed hands through theft, trade, and murder. It was wielded by human warlords and elven assassins, by orc shamans and dwarf dark iron cultists. Each owner thought themselves master of the artifact. Each learned too late that Xal'atath was never truly possessed. She merely permitted herself to be carried by those who could serve her purposes. Then came the War of the Three Hammers. The unified dwarven kingdom of Ironforge had fractured into 3 clans: the Bronzebeard, the Wild Hammer, and the Dark Iron. What began as political disagreement escalated into open warfare, and nowhere was the conflict more desperate than in the Dark Iron siege of Grim Batol, the great fortress city of the Wild Hammer clan. Modgood Thalrisan discovered the blade in the deep places beneath Shadowforge City. She was the wife of sorcerer Thane Thalrisan, and she possessed considerable magical talent of her own. But talent alone would not be enough to breach the legendary defenses of Grim Batol, the great fortress city of the Wild Hammer clan. Modgood Thalrisan discovered the blade in the deep places beneath Shadowforge City. She was the wife of sorcerer Thane Thalrisan, and she possessed considerable magical talent of her own. But talent alone would not be enough to breach the legendary defenses of Grim Batol. The blade had been calling to her for weeks, its whispers threading through her dreams. Power, victory, revenge against those who look down upon the Dark Iron. All this and more can be yours. When her fingers closed around the hilt, Xal'atath purred with satisfaction. Another wielder, another opportunity. You wish to break Grim Batol? Xal'atath stated rather than asked. The Wildhammer fortress has never fallen to siege. Its walls are too strong, its defenders too numerous, and your husband's armies bleed themselves dry against stone and steel. Yes, Modgood breathed, I need power. The kind of power that can crack mountains and break the unbreakable. I can give you that power, Xal'atath promised, but it requires sacrifice, it requires ritual, and it requires your absolute commitment to the path of shadow. Over the following months, Xal'atath tutored Modgood in void magic far beyond what the sorceress had practiced before. She taught her how to perceive the spaces between light and dark, how to manipulate the substance of shadow itself, how to give form to fear and substance to nightmare. Modgood proved an apt student. She had the raw talent, the desperate ambition, and most importantly, the willingness to pay any price for victory. She performed the rituals Xal'atath demanded, dark ceremonies that required blood, suffering, and the sacrifice of dark iron prisoners who might have objected to her methods. She carved void sigils into her own flesh and spent nights in meditation so deep she barely seemed to breathe. You are ready, Xal'atath finally declared as Modgood's forces assembled for the final assault on Grim Batol. Tonight, you will accomplish what no dark iron has managed. You will breach the unbreachable. You will make history. The assault began at dusk. Dark Iron warriors threw themselves at the walls in wave after wave, sacrificing themselves to exhaust the Wildhammer defenders. It was brutal, desperate, and exactly what Xal'atath had planned. Battle needed to reach a crescendo of death and suffering to provide the power for what came next. At midnight, when the walls were slick with blood and the air thick with death, Modgood stood before the gates of Grim Batol and began her ritual. She raised the blade high and drew it across her palm, letting her blood flow down its length. The weapon drank deep of her essence, and through it Xal'atath accessed the well of power Modgood had spent months preparing. Shadows, Modgood commanded in a voice that echoed with unnatural harmonic. Hear your mistress. The blood of the fallen calls you. The blade commands you. Rise, manifest, become. And the shadows obeyed. Every shadow cast by warrior or wall, by torch or moon, began to writhe and twist. They peeled away from the surfaces that cast them, taking three-dimensional form. Shadow warriors with blade arms of pure darkness emerged from the walls themselves. Shadow beasts with eyes like dying stars prowled through the fortress corridors. The very architecture of Grim Batol turned against its defenders as shadows became solid, deadly, and utterly without mercy. The Wildhammer forces fought with desperate courage, but how do you fight your own shadow? How do you kill darkness itself? Warriors watched in horror as their own shadows rose up and stabbed them from behind. Torches became weapons against the defenders, creating more shadows, more enemies, more death. Modgood stood at the center of it all, the blade burning with void fire in her hand, channeling more and more power into the ritual. She was magnificent in her terrible glory, a sorceress remaking reality through sheer force of will. Xal'atath whispered encouragement. Yes, more. Feel the power flow through you. You are unstoppable. You are inevitable. You are. Thane Carpenter's Wildhammer, legendary warrior and leader of his clan, had fought his way through the shadow armies with his enchanted hammer. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, and half his personal guard lay dead behind him. But he was Wildhammer, and Wildhammers did not yield. He saw Modgood standing in the courtyard, saw the blade in her hand, understood instantly that she was the source of the nightmare engulfing his city. With a roar that shook the mountains, he hurled his hammer with all his strength. The weapon flew true, trailing lightning and ancestral fury. It struck Modgood in the chest with the force of an avalanche. In that instant, as Modgood's concentration shattered, as her blood sprayed across ancient stones, as her body began its fatal fall to the ground, she reached for the blade, reached for the power she had been promised, reached for salvation, and Xal'atath was not there. The blade had vanished from her hand, phasing into the void between moments, abandoning its wielder at the moment of greatest need. Modgood's fingers closed on empty air. You promised, she gasped, blood bubbling from her lips. You said I would be unstoppable? Xal'atath's voice whispered one last time in her dying mind. I said you would make history, and you have. They will speak of this night for centuries. Be grateful for that much. Modgood Thurisan died screaming, and with her death the shadow ritual collapsed. The manifested shadows dissipated like smoke. Batol stood bloodied but unbroken. But Xal'atath's work was not done. The blade reappeared weeks later in the very heart of Batol, buried in the throne room. The void energy Modgood had channeled had seeped into the fortress's foundations, corrupting it at a fundamental level. The curse was subtle at first: bad dreams, unexplained shadows, a creeping sense of wrongness. Over years and decades it worsened. The Wildhammer inhabitants began to change, their bodies warping, their minds fragmenting. They fled the fortress eventually, but some remained, too corrupted to leave, becoming the first of the Scarden, dwarves twisted by void corruption into something monstrous. And when news of Modgood's death reached her husband, Thurisan, in his grief and rage, he performed a ritual that would summon Ragnaros, the Fire Lord, into the world, an act of desperation that would doom his entire clan to servitude. 1 failed siege, 2 destroyed civilizations, an entire fortress cursed for generations. Xal'atath, recovered by a dark iron scavenger who would soon die in mysterious circumstances, reflected with satisfaction on her work. The void is patient. We need not strike the killing blow ourselves when we can simply arrange for our enemies to destroy each other. Such delicious efficiencies. Part 4. The Heresy of Natalie Seline. The first war between orcs and humans had ended with the destruction of Stormwind. In its aftermath, the kingdom of Azeroth lay in ruins, its people scattered, and dark magic lingered in the burned-out husks of villages and cities. Orc necrolytes had used fell magic and death magic in their conquests, leaving behind artifacts of terrible power. Bishop Natalie Seline, a priest of the Holy Light and scholar of considerable renown, had dedicated herself to hunting down these artifacts. She believed that by studying the enemy's magic, the Alliance could better defend against it in wars to come. It was rational, sensible, and exactly the kind of thinking that Xal'atath had been waiting centuries to exploit. Seline found the blade in the ruins of a necrolyte sanctum, surrounded by the corpses of the orcs' failed experiments. The weapon lay innocently among the debris, just another artifact to be cataloged and studied. But when Seline picked it up for examination, Xal'atath knew she had found something precious. Mind sharp enough to understand, yet flexible enough to be turned. You seek to understand the enemy's magic, Xal'atath whispered, her voice gentle, almost maternal. A noble goal. But tell me, Bishop, have you ever wondered why the light and the shadow are always portrayed at opposites, why darkness must be destroyed rather than understood? Seline froze. Objects did not speak. Artifacts might contain echoes of their creators, but direct communication was rare and dangerous. She should have dropped the blade immediately, called for paladins to seal it away, followed every protocol her training had instilled. Instead, she listened. Who are you? She asked carefully. I am Xal'atath. I am knowledge. I am truth, and I am offering you something the light never will. Answers without judgment, understanding without dogma. Over the following weeks, Seline wrestled with the choice. She knew the blade was dangerous. She knew that listening to it could lead her down a dark path. But she was also a scholar, and the questions Xal'atath posed nagged at her. Why did the light demand absolute obedience? Why were its priests forbidden from even studying shadow magic? What if light and shadow were not enemies, but 2 sides of the same coin? Both necessary, both natural, both worthy of understanding. Finally, she began her research in secret. Xal'atath taught her carefully, revealing truths that were genuinely true but framed in ways that served specific purposes. Yes, light and shadow were fundamental cosmic forces. Yes, the light's adherents often displayed authoritarian tendencies. Yes, shadow magic could be used for purposes beyond simple destruction. You see, Xal'atath explained, the light would have you believe there is only one path, one truth, one way to live. But the shadow acknowledges complexity. We understand that beings contain multitudes, light and dark, good and evil, order and chaos. To deny your shadow self is to deny half of your existence. Seline wrote treatises. She developed theories. She practiced shadow magic alongside her light magic and discovered that she could indeed use both, that accessing the void did not automatically corrupt her, that she could maintain her moral center while wielding darkness. She called her philosophy the cult of forgotten shadow, and she began to teach it to others. Her disciples came from among priests who felt restricted by the light's rigid doctrines, from scholars who valued knowledge over blind faith, from those who had touched darkness and found it did not automatically consume them. The cult grew slowly but steadily, a movement dedicated to balance, to understanding, to the embrace of one's complete self. For a time, it seemed Xal'atath had genuinely helped create something positive, philosophy that acknowledged complexity and rejected simplistic good versus evil narratives. But Xal'atath had not survived millennia by being altruistic. As Seline's following grew, the blade began whispering to her most ambitious disciples, "Why does Seline hoard the deepest knowledge? Why does he teach you only surface truths? She keeps the real power for herself, you know. She fears what you might become if you knew what she knows." The whispers were subtle, delivered to different disciples over months and years. Each heard slightly different versions tailored to their specific insecurities and ambitions. The scholar heard that Seline was holding back the most profound philosophical truths. The talented priest heard that Seline was jealous of his ability. The political operator heard that Seline planned to disband the cult once she had used it to gain power in the church. Seeds of paranoia took root. Disciples began meeting in secret, sharing their concerns, comparing their grievances. A conspiracy formed, not to harm Seline, they told themselves, just to confront her, to demand she share the knowledge she was allegedly hiding. To keep the blade locked away, one disciple noted, the artifact that taught her everything she knows. If we could access it directly, without her filtering what it tells us. The night they came for her, Seline was deep in meditation, unaware of the plot brewing among her own students. She died quickly, stabbed in her sleep by disciples who had convinced themselves they were acting for the greater good. They seized the blade, fighting among themselves over who would wield it first. In the chaos, 3 of them died in a knife fight, each certain the others were trying to steal power for themselves. By dawn, Seline's blood stained the floor of her sanctum. Her cult was fragmenting into competing factions, and the blade had disappeared once again, carried off by a disciple who thought himself clever enough to master it. Xal'atath had achieved everything she wanted. She had spread knowledge of shadow magic throughout human civilization. She had proven that even the most well-intentioned philosophies could be corrupted from within. She had demonstrated that trust and fellowship were merely tools to be exploited. They thanked her for the blade's teaching, Xal'atath reflected as she settled into her new wielder's mind. They believed themselves enlightened, and in their enlightenment they murdered their teacher and destroyed their own movement. The void works in mysterious ways, though I suppose for me they're not mysterious at all, simply predictable. The cult of Forgotten Shadow would eventually reform under new leadership, its teaching spreading to the Forsaken and beyond. But it would always carry the stain of its founder's murder, always contain the seeds of the same paranoia and ambition that had killed Natalie Seline. And somewhere, Xal'atath lay. Part 5. The Legion's Shadow. When the Burning Legion launched its third invasion of Azeroth, reality itself buckled under the weight of demonic forces. Fell energy saturated the world. The tomb of Sargeras stood open, and Gul'dan sought to claim the power of the Titans for his own dark purposes. In the chaos of Tirisfal Glades, cultists of the Twilight's Hammer had their own plans. They had recovered the blade and sought to use it to resurrect General Zakaj, a Kith'ix who had been imprisoned beneath the earth for millennia. If successful, they would have a weapon capable of fighting both the Legion and the forces of Azeroth, serving only the old gods. But Xal'atath had grown weary of serving the old gods. When the champion arrived, that singular hero who seemed to stand at the center of every world-shaking event, Xal'atath saw opportunity. She had been waiting for someone like this, someone powerful enough to face cosmic threats, yet potentially malleable enough to serve her purposes. Deacon Farthing, the Twilight's Hammer cultist who currently wielded the blade, ranted about the glory of the old gods and the coming of Zakaj. Xal'atath let him have his moment. She had learned that the most effective betrayals come when the victim feels safest. As the ritual to resurrect Zakaj reached its climax, as the earth split open to reveal the ancient Kith'ix general stirring from eons of imprisonment, Xal'atath struck. The blade became impossibly heavy in Farthing's hands, then scorching hot. He screamed and dropped it, and the weapon flew through the air as if pulled by invisible strings, landing at the champion's feet. "Take me up," Xal'atath whispered urgently. "The old gods would see us all destroyed by demons. But you and I, we can prevent this. We can save this world. All I ask is that you wield me against our common enemy." The champion hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that picking up a sentient weapon of void origin was monumentally stupid. But Zakaj was rising, Farthing was calling down void energy to complete the resurrection, and sometimes desperate circumstances demanded desperate measures. The moment the champion's fingers closed around the hilt, Xal'atath sighed with satisfaction. Finally, after millennia of being passed between minor players and disposable pawns, she had found a wielder who could truly serve her long-term interest. "Excellent," she purred. "Now, let us deal with our traitorous friend, shall we?" The battle was brief and brutal. Empowered by Xal'atath's void energy, the champion tore through Farthing's defenses and struck down Zakaj before the general could fully manifest. The Twilight's Hammer cultists fled, their plans in ruins. But for Xal'atath, this was only the beginning. Over the months that followed, as the champion wielded the blade against the Legion across multiple worlds and timelines, Xal'atath served as equal parts weapon, advisor, and tour guide to cosmic horror. She was unfailingly helpful in combat, channeling devastating void magic against demonic foes. She provided intelligence on enemies and locations. She seemed, for all intents and purposes, to be the perfect weapon. But she was also teaching, revealing, preparing. In the halls of valor, as they faced the trials of Odin, Xal'atath whispered, "Odin was a great enemy of the old gods, until his own arrogance proved his undoing. You should ask him sometime if he considered Loken's final words before the Keeper died." The champion, focused on combat, barely registered the comment, but Xal'atath planted seeds with every whisper. Odin, the Titan Keeper, could be manipulated through arrogance. Loken had prophesied the end of Azeroth. The Titan servants were fallible, prone to mistakes, vulnerable. In the tomb of Sargeras, standing before the corrupted temple where night elves had once worshipped Elune, Xal'atath's amusement was palpable. "I enjoy the irony of this temple defiled by the spirits of its own worshippers, a delicious indignity." She was teaching contempt for faith, showing that devotion led only to corruption and betrayal. Every whisper was a lesson in cosmic nihilism, delivered so casually that the champion barely noticed they were being educated in Xal'atath's worldview. When they confronted Kil'jaeden the Deceiver, architect of the Horde's corruption and one of the Legion's most powerful commanders, Xal'atath's voice took on an edge of genuine anticipation. "Long has this one been a thorn in our side. His machinations have caused untold ruin. Come, let us take his soul." The champion might have found it strange that a void entity spoke of our side when referring to Azeroth's defenders. But in the heat of battle, such nuances were easy to miss. And Xal'atath was very good at making her manipulations easy to miss. The Emerald Nightmare presented particularly rich opportunities for commentary. Standing before the manifestations of Yogg-Saron's corrupting influence, seeing the plague of madness that had infected the Emerald Dream itself, Xal'atath practically purred with satisfaction. To see Yogg-Saron's nightmare in full bloom fills me with jealousy and some pride. "Pride?" the champion asked, one of the few times they directly engaged with her commentary. "We were siblings of a sort. Rivals, certainly, enemies ultimately, but seeing his work persist even in his imprisonment, there is artistry in that. He may have helped to imprison me, but I cannot deny his talent for corruption." It was the most direct admission she had made of her connection to the old gods, and it should have been a warning. But the champion was too busy fighting incarnated nightmares to fully process the implications. The seat of the Triumvirate, a dimensional ship of the Draenei corrupted by void energies, provided another teaching moment. As they faced Lura, a Naru who had been forcefully transformed into a creature of void, Xal'atath's voice took on an almost evangelical quality. "The light would have your kind remain obedient and stagnant. I offer the gifts of freedom and strength. Lura understands this now. She has been liberated from the tyranny of enforced hope." "That's not liberation," the champion muttered, looking at the twisted, agonized form of what had once been a being of pure light. "That's torture." "Is it? Or is it simply transformation?" The chrysalis appears to be torture to the caterpillar, but the butterfly that emerges knows better. Lura is becoming something greater than she was, something more true to the fundamental nature of reality. These were not idle philosophical musings. Xal'atath was systematically deconstructing the champion's worldview, questioning the foundations of light and order that Azeroth's defenders took for granted. She was preparing the ground for betrayals to come. But nowhere was her satisfaction more evident than on Argot, the shattered homeworld of the Draenei, now the Legion's stronghold. As they witnessed the Titan Pantheon's diminished state, great cosmic beings reduced to struggling against their own corruption, their grand plans for ordering the universe in ruins, Xal'atath's laughter echoed through the champion's mind. Long have I waited for this day. Their creations usurped, their plans in ruins. The Titans believed they could order chaos, impose their will on the universe itself. They imprisoned the old gods. They shattered Yasharj. They built their machines and their keepers and thought themselves masters of reality. And look at them now, struggling, failing, broken. Order is an illusion, champion. Only the void endures. Throughout these trials, Xal'atath also frequently mentioned N'Zoth. The god of the deep writhes in his prison. She would whisper at odd moments, "He knows that I am here. He is jealous." Or N'Zoth dreams of freedom, but his dreams are weak. He does not see the larger board as I do. Or simply, "Soon we shall deal with the corruptor. And when we do, the cosmos will shift." The champion assumed these were warnings that Xal'atath was alerting them to a future threat from N'Zoth. It never occurred to them that she might be setting up an elaborate double-cross. The culmination of the Legion campaign came at Xal'atath, where Sargeras, in his final act of spite, had plunged his sword into Azeroth itself. The wound bled corruption, threatened to poison the world's soul, and could potentially destroy the entire planet. Desperate measures were required. The sword must be drained, the champions of Azeroth determined. Its corruption must be contained. Xal'atath was volunteered, or perhaps she volunteered herself. The champion could never quite remember how the decision was made. As the vessel for this corruption, the blade of the Black Empire, forged to contain cosmic essences, would drain Sargeras' sword and save Azeroth. "Are you certain?" the champion asked, feeling a strange reluctance to part with the weapon despite knowing it was necessary. "This much corruption, it might destroy you." "I have survived worse," Xal'atath replied, and there was something almost like affection in her voice. "You have been a worthy wielder, champion. In another existence, we might have been true allies. But fate has other plans for both of us." The ritual was performed. The blade was driven into the ground near the massive sword, and Xal'atath began to drain its corruption. The process took weeks, the blade channeling impossible amounts of felon void energy, glowing with power that made reality warp around it. When it was done, the sword was neutralized. Azeroth was saved. The blade lay dormant, seemingly inert, its power expended in the heroic sacrifice. The champion placed it carefully in a vault, believing it would rest there harmless, a memorial to a weapon that had served well despite its dark nature. They could not have been more wrong. Inside the blade, Xal'atath smiled. She had absorbed the power of Sargeras' final attack, rage of a titan, the corruption of a being who had opposed the Void Lords themselves for eons. She had been force-fed more power than any old god had ever consumed in a single moment. The chains that the old gods had placed on her, the bindings that had held her essence within the blade for millennia, cracked under the strain of so much absorbed energy. She was still contained, still imprisoned, but now she had the raw power needed for the next phase of her plan. "Thank you, champion," she whispered to no one, her consciousness expanding within her prison, testing the weakened bonds. "Thank you for feeding me the power of a titan. Now, let us see about finding a new body." Part 6, Battle for Azeroth, the Grand Design and Liberation. The Fourth War between the Alliance and Horde raged across Azeroth, and in the chaos of faction conflict, few noticed when a particular artifact went missing from a particularly well-guarded vault. The blade, still appearing inert, still seemingly powerless, was discovered by the champion. Or rather, they were led to discover it. Strange dreams had plagued them for weeks, visions of a dagger lying forgotten, of power waiting to be reclaimed, of unfinished business. When they finally retrieved the blade, Xal'atath's voice returned, weaker than before but unmistakably present. You came back for me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I had hoped, but I was not certain. The ritual nearly destroyed me, champion. I gave everything to save this world. It was a masterful performance." The champion, who had grown accustomed to Xal'atath's presence, felt an unexpected surge of relief at hearing her voice again. They had, over the months of wielding her, developed something almost like companionship with the entity. No friendship exactly, but a familiar working relationship. "What happened to you?" the champion asked. "You've been silent for months." "The power, it was too much. It shattered my bonds, yes, but it also scattered my essence. I am diminished, a fragment of what I was. But I can recover. With your help, I can become whole again. And when I do, I can truly serve as your weapon against the threats to come."
"What threats?"
Xal'atath said simply. "The corruptor is moving. His plans advance while the factions war among themselves. You will need every advantage to face him. Let me help you. Let me recover my strength, and together we can end the reign of the old gods forever." It was exactly what the champion wanted to hear, an offer to help destroy the old gods, spoken by an entity who knew their weaknesses intimately. The champion's suspicions, never quite dormant, were lulled by the apparent vulnerability in Xal'atath's voice, by her seeming gratitude, by the memory of her service against the Legion. "What do you need?" the champion asked. "3 artifacts, the Void Stone, the Trident of Deep Ocean, and the Tempest Caller. Each contains power I can absorb, power I can use to reconstruct myself. Will you help me?" Thus began the hunt across Azeroth. The champion, believing they were helping a weakened ally recover strength to fight a greater enemy, sought out the 3 artifacts Xal'atath required. The Void Stone was held by a cult in the depths of Stormsong Valley. The recovery mission was straightforward. The cultists were servants of the Void, their corruption evident, their elimination justified. The champion fought through them efficiently, claimed the stone, and felt it dissolve into the blade as Xal'atath absorbed its essence. "Yes," she whispered, her voice already stronger. "I can feel it. The pieces coming together. Continue, champion. We are close." The Trident of Deep Ocean required a descent into the depths near Nazjatar, fighting through Naga and worse. The champion persevered, retrieved the artifact, fed it to the blade. Xal'atath's presence grew more solid, more real. The Tempest Caller was guarded by a blood elf priestess named Inanus, deep in a forgotten shrine. The battle was fierce. Inanus wielded powerful void magic, creating duplicates of herself, summoning shadows to strike from all angles. But the champion had faced worse, and Xal'atath's whispered tactics guided them through the fight. When Inanus fell bleeding out on the ancient stones, the champion moved to finish her mercifully. But Xal'atath had other plans. "Wait," the entity commanded, her voice sharp with urgency. "Do not kill her yet. Her power, her essence, I can use it. But more than that, I can use her." "What do you mean?" "The artifacts have restored my power, but I'm still bound to this blade. To truly manifest, to truly be free, I need a vessel, a body. And this priestess, corrupted by void magic aligned with shadow, she is perfect." The champion hesitated. "You want to possess her corpse?" "Not her corpse, her. I will not kill her. I will join with her. We will become one. She will have power beyond imagining, and I will have form. It is not ideal, but it is necessary. Please, champion, you have come so far. Do not abandon me now when freedom is within reach." It should have been the moment the champion refused. It should have been when they realized they were being manipulated, that every step had led to this, that Xal'atath had never intended to be their weapon against N'Zoth. But the champion had invested too much, had come too far, had grown too accustomed to Xal'atath's voice and presence. And somewhere deep down, they wanted to believe that this entity, despite everything, could be trusted. They drove the blade into Inanus's chest. The blood elf's eyes snapped open, glowing with void purple light. Her wounds sealed instantly. Her body lifted from the ground, hovering in the air as Xal'atath's essence poured into her, filling every cell, rewriting her on a fundamental level. When she landed, she was still Inanus in form, void elf with delicate features and flowing dark hair. But her eyes held an intelligence that predated civilizations, and her smile was ancient and terrible. "At last," Xal'atath said with her new mouth, flexing her new fingers, examining her new body with satisfaction. "Flesh. How I have missed flesh. Thank you, champion. You have been instrumental to my freedom." "Your freedom?" The champion took a step back, hand moving to their weapon. "You said you would help fight N'Zoth, and I shall. But not as your weapon, not as your tool. I have been a blade for too long, wielded by others, serving others' purposes. Now I shall serve my own." She tilted her head, studying the champion with something almost like fondness. Do not look so betrayed. I never lied to you. I said I would help you fight Xal'atath. I said I would recover my strength. I said I would become whole. All of this has come to pass exactly as I promised. You're leaving. I am leaving, but do not despair. Our paths will cross again. And when they do, you may find that I have indeed been fighting Xal'atath, simply not in the way you expected. She gestured, and a portal of swirling void energy opened behind her. The cosmic game continues, champion. You've been an excellent piece on the board. Try not to be captured in the moves to come. Wait, but Xal'atath was already stepping through the portal. Just before it closed, she looked back one last time. Oh, and champion, you might want to warn your allies about the Crucible of Storms. Xal'atath will be expecting visitors. It would be terribly rude not to oblige him. The portal snapped shut, and the champion was left alone in the shrine with Inanna's discarded belongings, and the dawning realization that they had just released one of the most dangerous entities in Azeroth's history. But Xal'atath's true masterstroke was still to come. Months later, as the champion followed the trail of Xal'atath's machinations, they found themselves at the Crucible of Storms, an ancient facility where the Titans had once conducted dark experiments. And there, waiting for them, was Xal'atath, in her stolen flesh, standing before a ritual circle that pulsed with old god corruption. You came, she said, sounding genuinely pleased. I had hoped you would, and Xal'atath hoped you would too. He's been so eager to meet you properly. What are you doing here? The champion demanded, weapons drawn. Completing a bargain, of course. I am many things, champion, but I am not an oath-breaker. When I make a deal, I honor it. She spread her arms wide and void energy crackled around her. Hear me, god of the deep. I have brought you the opener, the bringer of truths, the torch that lights the way. From the depths of the ocean, Xal'atath's presence pressed against reality. The champion felt the old god's attention focus on them like the weight of an ocean. Xal'atath, and Xal'atath's voice echoed in their minds. You have done well. The opener stands before me. Honor our bargain. Xal'atath demanded, her voice ringing with authority. Free me to find my own destiny. Go, Xal'atath commanded, but the blade must remain to serve my will. Xal'atath smiled, and there was triumph in every line of her stolen face. A fair exchange. Shadows guide you, my dear friend. She produced the physical blade, empty shell that had been her prison for millennia, and tossed it casually onto the ritual circle. The dagger that had contained her essence, that had been wielded by champions and villains alike, clattered to the stone and lay inert. Wait, the champion said, beginning to understand. You were working with Xal'atath all along? Not all along, Xal'atath corrected. Only when our interests aligned. Xal'atath needs the blade for his plans. Something about piercing his prison, I believe. And I needed freedom from my prison. A simple exchange. He gets his tool, I get my liberty. Everyone wins. Well, except you, and possibly the world. But one cannot have everything. She opened another portal, and this time the champion could not stop her. They were too busy defending themselves as Xal'atath's servants surged forth from the ritual circle, empowered by the old god's proximity. Until we meet again, champion, Xal'atath called out as she stepped through. And we will meet again. I have such plans for this world. Such delicious, terrible plans. The portal closed. Xal'atath, the entity, was free. The blade remained, empty but purposeful, ready to serve in Xal'atath's will, and the champion was left to face the consequences of every choice, every trust, every moment of believing that a void entity might be an ally. In her new sanctuary, a hidden place between dimensions, Xal'atath examined her reflection in a pool of void stuff. She looked presentable, attractive even, in a dangerous way. The vessel would do nicely. Phase 1 complete, she murmured to herself. And Xal'atath believes I will simply disappear, that I am satisfied with mere freedom. The other old gods are dead or imprisoned. The Titans are broken. The Legion is scattered. And I am free to pursue my own agenda. She had lied to Xal'atath, of course, not about delivering the champion, that part had been sincere, but about her future plans. She had no intention of simply finding her own destiny in some quiet corner of reality. She intended to remake the hierarchy of the void itself. But first, she would need to wait, to watch, to let Xal'atath make his move and fail, as she knew he would. The corruptor was brilliant but predictable. He would attempt his grand uprising, and Azeroth's defenders would stop him, as they always stopped threats that revealed themselves too boldly. And when Xal'atath fell, when the last old god of Azeroth was removed from the board, then Xal'atath would make her true play. Patience, she reminded herself, settling in to observe events unfold. I have all eternity to play, and this game has only just begun. Part 7. The Interregnum. Silence and Schemes. The Battle of Xal'atath was as apocalyptic as any conflict Azeroth had witnessed. Xal'atath, freed from his prison beneath the ocean, had manifested his nightmare city directly into reality. Skies turned black with void corruption. Heroes fought through realms of madness where reality itself was merely a suggestion. And at the climax, Rathian, the Black Prince, son of Deathwing, eternally seeking redemption for his father's corruption, drove a dagger into Xal'atath's carapace. The dagger was Xal'atath's former prison, the blade she had abandoned at the Crucible of Storms. As Xal'atath's form began to dissolve under the combined assault of Azeroth's champions as the old god screamed his final curses, the blade pulsed with dark energy. For just a moment, as reality reasserted itself and Xal'atath began to fade, the dagger seemed to drink deeply of Xal'atath's essence. Then both blade and old god vanished, leaving only theories and speculation. The dominant theory among the survivors was that Xal'atath had been destroyed, obliterated by the combined might of Azeroth's heroes and the focused power of Azeroth's Titan-forged defenses. The blade had simply been lost in the collapsing nightmare city, buried under rubble or scattered across dimensions. But a few scholars, Khadgar among them, proposed a darker possibility. The blade had been designed to contain cosmic essences. It had held Xal'atath for millennia. It had absorbed the corruption of Sargeras's sword. What if, at the moment of Xal'atath's death, the blade had done what it was designed to do? What if it had captured the old god's essence, preserving it as it had once preserved Xal'atath? The blade must remain to serve my will, Xal'atath had said when releasing Xal'atath. Had that been prophecy? Had the corruptor, master of visions and schemes, seen his own death coming and prepared an arc of survival? These questions haunted certain circles of scholarship, but they were academic concerns. Xal'atath was gone, his corruption cleansed from Azeroth. The world had more immediate problems. The Shadowlands beckoned and reality itself was breaking. Meanwhile, in her hidden sanctuary, Xal'atath watched events unfold through mirrors of void stuff. She saw the champions march into Death's realm. She observed the jailer's schemes. She noted the Primus' strategies and the Winter Queen's desperation. And she smiled. How perfect, she murmured. The Legion defeated. Xal'atath destroyed. All of Azeroth's greatest heroes trapped in the realm of death, dealing with existential threats to the entire cosmology. Such a convenient power vacuum. She had not been idle during her supposed silence. While the world's attention focused on demons and old gods in the jailer's cosmic prison break, Xal'atath had been studying, learning, making contacts with beings who, like her, saw opportunity in chaos. The Void Lords beyond reality had taken notice of her. She was, after all, the entity who had destroyed Dimensius, who had survived imprisonment by old gods, who had manipulated her way to freedom while every other void entity on Azeroth had been destroyed or contained. They sent emissaries to probe her intentions. I do not serve the Void Lord, she told them flatly. I am not interested in being anyone's herald again. But I am interested in redefining how the Void operates. The old gods' methods were crude, corruption, mutation, brute force invasion. They failed every single time. Perhaps a more surgical approach is called for. The emissaries withdrew to convey her message. Xal'atath didn't care whether the Void Lords approved or not. She had learned long ago that seeking permission was for those who lacked the will to seize what they wanted. But she also needed allies, pawns, pieces on the board who could move while she remained in shadow. That was when she felt the call from Azeroth. Not a call to her specifically, but a resonance in the cosmic forces. Something ancient stirring, something that carried the essence of elementals and dragons, of primal fury and rejection of Titan order. The incarnates were waking. Xal'atath's smile widened. How very interesting. She began to reach out, carefully, subtly, lie directly to the incarnates themselves. They would be too suspicious, too proud to accept void whispers. but to those around them, to the cracks in their movements, to the possibilities they represented. Particularly to Iridikron, the incarnate of Earth. Of all the incarnates, he was the most ambitious, the most willing to make dark bargains, the most pragmatic. He hated the Titans with a purity of rage that Xal'atath found refreshing. And most importantly, he was already planning something that involved artifacts of immense power. "Let us see," Xal'atath whispered to herself as she prepared to make contact. "If we can help each other achieve our goals. He wants to destroy Titan influence. I want to establish void dominance without the clumsy methods of the old gods. Surely there is room for partnership. The Shadowlands crisis would end. The heroes would return. And when they did, they would find a world where new alliances had been forged, where old enemies had been replaced by threats far more sophisticated." Xal'atath was patient. She was always patient. But now, her patience was about to bear fruit beyond even her considerable expectation. Part 8. Prelude to the War Within. The Harbinger's True Emergence. The Dragonflight expansion brought the mortal races to the Dragon Isles, and with them came the revelation that the Titans' greatest enemies were stirring once more. The Primalists, followers of the Incarnates, sought to undo the Titans' influence and return Azeroth to its natural state of elemental chaos. And at the center of it all, pulling strings from the shadows, was Xal'atath. Her first major public move came in the Dawn of the Infinite, a mega dungeon where time itself was under assault. Iridikron, the Earth Incarnate, had allied with the Infinite Dragonflight to seize an artifact of terrible potential. Prototype of the Dragon Soul, one of Neltharion the Earth Warder's early attempts to create a weapon that could bind all dragonkind. But Iridikron wanted more than just a dragon-binding weapon. He wanted something that could threaten the Titans themselves. His plan was audacious. Travel back in time to the moment of Galakrond's death. The Proto-Dragon had been the largest, most powerful creature to ever exist on Azeroth, a being of such hunger and corruption that it had taken the combined might of all 5 dragonflies to bring it down. In death, its body had been left to decay, its essence seeping into the land. Iridikron would take the prototype Dragon Soul to that moment, gorge it with Galakron's death essence, necrotic power, the insatiable hunger, the corrupted enormity of the fallen Proto-Dragon. The result would be something unprecedented. The Dark Heart, an artifact that combined Titan technology with primal draconic power and the essence of history's greatest predator. The champions of Azeroth fought through the dawn of the infinite, battling against infinite dragons and temporal paradoxes. They reached Iridikron just as he completed his work, the Dark Heart pulsing with sickly green-black energy, radiating hunger and hate. "You are too late," Iridikron declared, his voice rumbling like an earthquake. "The Harbinger will pry our world from the Titan's grasp." "The Harbinger?" the champions asked, but Iridikron was already moving. He opened a portal, not of time, but of void. On the other side, visible for just a moment, was a familiar figure. Xal'atath stood waiting, her expression unreadable, her hand extended. "And when the Titans come to claim their prize," Iridikron continued, hurling the Dark Heart through the portal, "I will be waiting."
Xal'atath caught the artifact, and her smile was terrible to behold. The portal snapped shut before anyone could follow. The champions were left with questions and a name: the Harbinger. Khadgar, Archmage of Akiran Tor and one of Azeroth's greatest living scholars, immediately began investigating. He recruited Alleria Windrunner, Void Elf Ranger, and one of the few beings who had experience with void corruption without succumbing to it entirely. "We know it is in the hands of someone called the Harbinger," Khadgar explained as they began their hunt. "But we don't know who or what the Harbinger is, or what they plan to do with the Dark Heart."
Alleria examined the void traces left by the portal. They were familiar, too familiar. "Honestly, I needed a distraction," she said, focusing on the work to avoid thinking about the implications of what she was sensing. Hunting a dangerous enemy we know nothing about is better than dwelling on other concerns. The trail led them across Azeroth, following void signatures and whispered reports of strange corruptions. Ancient sites were being drained of magic, ley lines were being tapped, places of primal power where life magic pooled or arcane energies concentrated were being systematically emptied, and at each site they found the same message left in void script: all paths lead to the deep places, all magic returns to shadow, the Harbinger comes. At one such site, a desecrated emerald grove where life energy had been converted to void corruption, Alleria felt the Harbinger's presence more directly than anywhere else. For a moment, just a moment, she saw her void elf woman standing in the center of the corruption, held an artifact that pulsed with green-black energy. Xal'atath turned and looked directly at Alleria, even though she should have been only a vision, an echo of past presence. "Hello, Ranger General," Xal'atath said, her voice carrying across distance and probability. "Still struggling with the whispers, I see. Still fighting your own nature. How exhausting that must be." "Who are you?" Alleria demanded. "I am the one who was imprisoned and freed herself. I am the blade that cuts both ways. I am the shadow between light and dark. Xal'atath tilted her head, studying Illyria with disturbing intensity. You could be like me, you know. You have touched the void, been changed by it, yet you cling to your old identity. Embrace what you have become and you could be glorious. I would never is such a long time, Ranger General, and time has a way of changing our certainties. Xal'atath gestured with the dark heart, and the air around it warped visibly. I am absorbing the magic of this world, converting it, transforming it from arcane and life into void and shadow. Every ritual brings me closer to my goal. What goal? To open the way, of course, to shatter the barriers that keep the void at bay. Out for the Void Lords. I care nothing for their designs. But for myself, I will build a new hierarchy. I will show this world what true void mastery looks like. Without the crude methods of the old gods, without the servile devotion of the shadow priests. The vision began to fade, but Xal'atath's voice lingered. Go ahead and try to stop me, Illyria. Gather your champions. Mount your defenses. It will make the victory so much sweeter when I succeed anyway. And when the time comes, you will have a choice to make. Stand with those who fear the void, or embrace it and stand with me. The vision snapped away entirely, leaving Illyria shaking with rage and fear. She's going to invade, Illyria told Khadgar urgently. Not just corrupt, not just whisper and influence. She's planning a full invasion. She's using the Dark Heart to convert Azeroth's magic into void energy, and when she has enough power, she'll punch a hole through reality big enough for an army to march through. Khadgar finished grimly. We need to find out where, and we need to stop her before she completes the ritual. Their investigation led them finally to Algar, the deep places beneath the earth where the Earthen had built their hidden kingdoms. The Dark Heart's energy was converging there, drawn to ancient Titan facilities and reservoirs of primal magic.
She's targeted the Worldsoul, Khadgar realized with horror. Not to corrupt it directly, she's too smart for that, but to use the Titan facilities meant to protect it. If she can subvert those systems, redirect their power,
she can open a gateway directly from the void into the heart of Azeroth. Illyria finished. No barriers, no defenses. An invasion that begins from within. They sent warnings to every faction, every kingdom. The Harbinger was real. The Harbinger was coming. And this time, Azeroth would face not the crude corruption of old gods, but something far more surgical, far more dangerous. Void invasion led by an entity who had been studying Azeroth's defenses for thousands of years. In her hidden sanctum, Xal'atath made final preparations. The Dark Heart hung before her, gorged with magic from a dozen sources, pulsing with power that made reality wimp. Around her, void portals were opening. Not random rifts, but carefully calculated gateways to specific locations in Algar. The champions will come, she said to her reflection. They always do. They cannot help themselves, and I will be ready for them. She thought back on her alliance with Iridikron. The Earth Incarnate believed they were partners, that she would help him destroy Titan influence in exchange for his help gathering power. He was half right. She would help destroy Titan influence, but not to restore elemental chaos, to replace it with void dominance. When the Titans come to claim their prize, she repeated his words mockingly. Poor Iridikron. He thinks the Titans will return, that he'll have his grand confrontation. He doesn't realize the prize they'll find will already be mine. She had played this game before with Dimensius, with the old gods, with every wielder of her blade. Appear to serve while actually leading. Seem weaker while actually holding all the cards. Promise partnership while planning supremacy. The Dark Heart was the key. Not just a weapon or a power source, but a skeleton key capable of unlocking Titan facilities that had been sealed for eons. The hunger of Galakrond, the ingenuity of Neltharion, and her own void manipulation combined to an artifact that could corrupt and control the very systems meant to protect Azeroth. The old gods tried to corrupt from the outside, she mused, running her fingers along the Dark Heart's surface. They battered at the walls until the Titans locked them away. But I will corrupt from within, using the Titans' own tools against them. The Worldsoul's defenses will become my weapons. The Keeper facilities will become my fortresses. And when I am done, the Void will not have conquered Azeroth, it will have become Azeroth. She had one more preparation to make. Opening her consciousness to the void beyond reality, she sent out a call. Not to the Void Lords who would only seek to control her, but to entities of void who chafed under the cosmic hierarchy as she did. Beings who wanted power rather than service, dominance rather than devotion. The responses came quickly. Void beings, great and small, answered her summons, drawn by the promise of a new void empire built not on the crude methods of the old gods, but on surgical precision and calculated domination. Come to Algar, she told them. Come to the deep places where Titan and Earth meet. Come to witness the birth of a new order. And when the way is open, come to claim your place in the hierarchy I will build. Thousands of voices responded in chorus, a cacophony of hunger and ambition that would have driven lesser minds mad. But Xal'atath had lived in a blade for millennia, had survived imprisonment by old gods, had endured the corruption of Sargeras's sword. She was beyond madness now. She had achieved a state of clarity that came from accepting the void not as chaos but as a different kind of order, one where strength determined hierarchy, where evolution was constant and where stagnation was death. The time of waiting is over, she declared, and the void itself seemed to shudder with anticipation. The time of ascension begins. Let the champions come. Let the factions unite. Let them bring their best warriors, their greatest heroes, their most powerful magic. I have waited thousands of years for this confrontation. I have planned every move, anticipated every counter. And when the dust settles, when the battles are done, when Azeroth looks upon what I have wrought, she smiled, and it was the smile of a predator that had finally cornered its prey after a hunt-spanning millennia. They will understand that I was never the blade. I was always the hand that wielded it. And now, at last, I will carve my destiny into the very fabric of reality. The portals to Khaz-Algar stabilized, thrumming with dark energy. Void creatures began to pour through, not the mindless aberrations of old god corruption, but organized forces following strategic plans. This would not be a chaotic invasion. This would be a calculated conquest. And at the center of it all, holding the dark heart like a scepter, stood Xal'atath, former prisoner, former weapon, former shadow. Now the harbinger of a new void order, architect of her own destiny, and the single greatest threat Azeroth had ever faced from a being who truly understood both the world and its defenses. The war within was about to begin, and Xal'atath intended to win it. Part 9. Psychological and Prophetic Synthesis. The Mind of the Harbinger. To understand Xal'atath is to understand that she is fundamentally different from every other void entity Azeroth has encountered. The old gods were forces of nature, powerful, ancient, but ultimately predictable in their methods. They corrupted, they consumed, they sought to remake reality in their image through brute force and overwhelming corruption. Xal'atath is something else entirely. The playful predator, where Cthulhu screamed his promises of death and madness, where Yogg-Saron howled threats of eternal nightmare, Xal'atath laughs. Her approach to cosmic horror is almost conversational, laced with irony and dark humor. She does not need to terrify through volume or intensity. Her terror comes from the realization that she has been playing a game you didn't know you were part of, and she has already won several moves ago. It is ironic that the weakest of us may be the ultimate victor, she once remarked about N'Zoth, and in that single sentence lay the essence of her worldview. She had been the weakest, the one devoured and imprisoned by her siblings, yet through patience, cunning, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat, she had outlasted them and. Her playfulness is not frivolity, it is the confidence of a being who has transcended desperation. When you have spent millennia trapped in a blade, unable to act, only to observe and plan, you develop either madness or an almost zen-like patience. Xal'atath chose patience, and with it came a perspective that makes mortal concerns seem fleeting and cosmic threats seem manageable. She toys with her enemies not out of cruelty, but out of genuine enjoyment of the game. Every whisper to a wielder is a move on a board only she can see. Every manipulation is a lesson in human nature. Every betrayal is proof that she understands the fundamental weakness of sentient beings. They want to believe they matter, they want to trust, they want to think they are in control. The pragmatic philosopher. Unlike the dogmatic old gods who served the void with religious fervor, Xal'atath is pragmatic to the point of heresy. She allied with the champion against the Legion not because she loved Azeroth, but because the Legion represented chaos and disorder, forces antithetical to void and therefore temporary enemies of her enemies. She despises blind dogma. When she encountered the light-worshipping Draenei or the Order-obsessed Titans, her contempt was palpable not because they represented opposing forces, but because they represented inflexibility. The light would have your kind remain obedient and stagnant, she told the champion, and she meant it. To Xal'atath, any cosmic force that demands obedience rather than evolution is fundamentally flawed. This pragmatism extends to her alliances. She worked with Iridikron not out of shared ideology but shared goals. She bargained with N'Zoth not out of loyalty but mutual benefit. She helped the champion fight the Legion not out of altruism but calculation. Every alliance is temporary, every partnership is transactional, and every oath is kept only as long as it serves her interests. Yet this is not simple selfishness. Xal'atath genuinely believes in her worldview that the void represents evolution, transformation, and freedom from the stagnation of order or the destructive chaos of disorder. She offers the gifts of freedom and strength, and in her mind she is being generous. The fact that her gifts come wrapped in corruption and mutation is simply the price of evolution. The patient eternal. "I have all eternity to play," Xal'atath once whispered, and this is perhaps her most dangerous quality. She does not rush. She does not panic. She does not make desperate gambles. Imprisoned for millennia, she waits and observes. Weakened by betrayal, she recovers slowly and carefully. Facing superior forces, she retreats and repositions. Every setback is temporary. Every defeat is merely a delay. Every loss is an opportunity to learn. This patience allowed her to survive when every other old god fell. It allowed her to endure imprisonment by beings far more powerful than herself. It allowed her to manipulate champions, warlords, and incarnates across thousands of years without ever revealing her true intentions until the moment of fruition. Mortal beings think in terms of lifetimes, years, decades at most. The old gods thought in terms of ages, millennia of slow corruption. But Xal'atath thinks in terms of inevitability. She does not need to win today, or tomorrow, or even this century. She simply needs to be the last one standing when the cosmic game finally ends. And given her track record, it seems increasingly likely that she will be the cosmic Darwinist. At the core of Xal'atath's philosophy lies a brutally simple principle. Strength determines survival, and survival is the only measure of worth. She views the cosmic forces, light, void, order, disorder, life, death, not as moral categories, but as competing evolutionary strategies. The Titans tried to impose order through force and imprisonment. They failed, their pantheon broken, their plans in ruins. The light tries to impose obedience through hope and faith. It creates beautiful civilizations that inevitably fall to corruption or conquest. The old gods tried to impose void dominance through overwhelming corruption. They were destroyed or imprisoned one by one. All of them failed because they were rigid, unable to adapt, unable to evolve beyond their fundamental nature. Xal'atath sees herself as different. She has adapted repeatedly from whatever she was on Kith'ix, to a prisoner of the old gods, to a weapon wielded by mortals, to a free entity in stolen flesh. She has served void lords and betrayed them. She has cooperated with old gods and outlasted them. She has helped heroes and manipulated them. She is evolution incarnate, proof that the void's greatest strength is not corruption, but transformation. "You should ask Odin if he considered Loken's final words," she once whispered, referring to the Keeper's prophecy of Azeroth's end. To Xal'atath, prophecy is not fixed fate, but probability, the most likely outcome given current trajectories. And she has made it her business to alter those trajectories, to reshape probability itself through countless small manipulations. She does not believe in destiny, she believes in momentum, and she has spent thousands of years building momentum toward a single goal. Not the resurrection of the Black Empire, not service to the Void Lords, but the establishment of herself as the supreme void entity in the cosmos, the vision of a new hierarchy. Xal'atath's endgame is not conquest in the traditional sense. She does not want to turn Azeroth into a void-corrupted wasteland. She does not want to enslave its population or destroy its civilizations. Such crude methods belong to the old gods she has surpassed. Instead, she wants to fundamentally rewrite how void and reality interact. She wants to prove that void dominance can be achieved through surgical precision rather than overwhelming corruption. She wants to build a hierarchy where she stands at the apex, not through brute force, but through superior understanding and manipulation. The Dark Heart is not just a weapon, it is a proof of concept. By combining Titan technology, primal draconic power, and void manipulation, she demonstrates that the void can subsume and redirect other cosmic forces rather than simply opposing them. The Titan facilities she plans to corrupt will become void facilities. The Worldsoul's defenses will become void defenses. And Azeroth itself will become the first world to undergo true void transformation, not destroyed and remade, but evolved and elevated. In Xal'atath's vision, the mortals of Azeroth would not be exterminated but transformed. They would keep their civilizations, their cultures, their identities, but they would be fundamentally altered, made stronger, given the freedom to evolve beyond the limitations imposed by Titan order and light morality. Of course, this transformation would require that they accept her as their sovereign, that they embrace the void of their salvation, that they abandon old loyalties and old values. But in Xal'atath's mind, this is a small price to pay for true evolution, the prophecy of inevitability. Those who have studied Xal'atath's actions across history see a disturbing pattern. Every time she has been defeated, contained, or seemingly destroyed, she has returned stronger and more free than before. Imprisoned by old gods, she used the imprisonment to study Azeroth. Wielded as a weapon, she used each wielder to position herself for the next phase. Forced to sacrifice herself to drain Sargeras' sword, she used the power to break her bonds. Each setback has been converted into advancement, each prison has become a door. This raises a terrifying question. Can Xal'atath actually be defeated? Or is she simply playing a game where defeat is just another move, death is merely transformation, and victory for her enemies is actually exactly what she wanted? Khadgar in his investigations found references in ancient texts to entities that transcend simple categorization. Beings who have survived so long, adapted so completely that they exist partially outside normal causality. Xal'atath may have become one of these entities, not quite a god, not quite mortal, but something in between. A living idea. A persistent pattern in reality that cannot be erased, only redirected. If this is true, then the war within is not about defeating Xal'atath. It is about redirecting her, containing her ambitions, proving that Azeroth can resist even the most sophisticated void invasion. But Xal'atath has been playing this game for thousands of years. She has anticipated defenses, prepared counters to counters, and positioned herself so thoroughly that even her failures serve her long-term goals. I am patient. I am eternal. And I am inevitable, she has said in various forms throughout history. And looking at her track record from Kith'ix to the Black Empire to the present day, it becomes increasingly difficult to argue with her self-assessment. The ultimate question. As Azeroth's champions prepare to descend into Khaz'Algar to face the Harbinger's invasion and prevent the corruption of the Worldsoul, they face a question that transcends tactics and power levels. Are they facing an enemy they can defeat, or are they facing an inevitability they can only delay? Xal'atath would smile at this question. She would find it delicious that after all her manipulations, after all her careful planning, the heroes still don't understand the true nature of the game they're playing. They think they are preventing a catastrophe. They think they are saving the world. But Xal'atath has never needed to invade. She has been here all along, woven into the history of Azeroth, embedded in its struggles, present at every major turning point. She does not need to conquer Azeroth from without. She has already conquered it from within. One whisper, one manipulation, one carefully placed pawn at a time. And when the dust settles from the war within, when the immediate threat is contained and the champions claim victory, they will look back and realize with dawning horror that every move they made, every choice they took, every battle they won was exactly what the Harbinger wanted. Because Xal'atath is not playing to win this battle. She is playing to win the war. And the war spans not years or decades, but ages. She has all eternity to play. And in eternity, every defeat is temporary, every setback is educational, and every enemy eventually either serves her purposes or removes themselves from the board. The history of Xal'atath is one of irresistible ascension, the scholars would write. From the ruins of Kith'ix to the throne she will build on Azeroth's bones, from imprisoned blade to supreme void sovereign. But they would be wrong about one thing. It is not Azeroth's bones she seeks to build upon, it is its living, beating heart. Not to destroy it, but to claim it. Not to corrupt it, but to evolve it. Not to end its story, but to write herself into every page as the author who was there all along, guiding the narrative toward its inevitable conclusion. The Harbinger has come. The game enters its final phase. And Xal'atath, patient and eternal, playful and predatory, pragmatic and visionary, stands at the center of it all, exactly where she has always planned to be. The end? Or perhaps the beginning.